All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'm so excited to be here tonight with Rachael Quisel, who is a developer and author, originally from Virginia, is now in Santa Barbara, California, which I'm jealous, being in Buffalo, New York, where it's freezing cold. um, and Rachael actually crafted their first novel on the New York City A train, while artfully avoiding knee contact with strangers, which I love. And when not writing or programming, they run up the Santa Ynez Mountains, manage their hospitality business, and are being walked by their companion animals, Gandalf, Clover, and Fern. So Rachael, thank you first and foremost for your time and for joining us tonight. The first thing I'd like to know is just what got you into writing? How did you start your writing journey?
Well, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, so I hate to be a cliche, but I did really start writing uh, very early on. And I think I didn't get serious about it because I'm going to try to, I can't pin you for whatever reason. So it's showing me. Here we go. Here we go. And I didn't get serious about it because I didn't really know any writers. I didn't really think it was a way I could sustain myself professionally. And so I kind of pushed it to the side, made it a hobby. It was kind of a fun thing I did with friends, or I wrote poetry. And it really wasn't until a little later in life that I decided, you know what, this writing thing isn't going away. These characters are like talking to me. I need to put them on a page. And yeah, that's when I decided to go back to school and sit down and finally write the novel.
That's fantastic. And so this is your first novel, right? This Above All?
Uh, so technically, that's the second novel I wrote.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is not the one that was composed on the subway?
Nope.
Um, I guess, can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write This Above All?
Yeah, so this above all specifically, in part, I wanted more narratives that highlighted LGBTQ characters. And I had never read a novel with an asexual protagonist who identified as a boy. I'd read a few who were girls. And so I thought, wow, like this person just isn't represented at all. Um, I'm demisexual, so I'm kind of on the ace spectrum. And kind of in learning more about asexuality, I was on forums and like chatting with people, and there were quite a few guys. And I just thought, wow, this is really needed. Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, and you mentioned coming back to school and sort of writing it through. This was your capstone project, right? Or your thesis?
No, this
No?
I actually, yeah, do you know Chris Mooney, one of the professors? Uh, yeah, so I think his was my second course in the master's degree program, and it was a short story course, and I wrote a short story, and it involved Andrew, the main character, and a few of the other characters by different names, and his feedback which is usually pretty direct, which I appreciated, was Rachael, this isn't a short story. This is a novel. Which of course is a pretty big mistake when you're in a short story writing class. But he was totally right. There was way too much going on. There were too many characters. It needed more space. And so I kind of said, okay, I'm going to set this aside. This is a novel. I'm going to write something else for this class. And I did. And thankfully I passed and continued writing. And I wrote this. So I started my first year. I did the program part time. And by the time I'd finished the program, I'd finished the novel and queried it and gotten an acceptance
Oh,
for
wow.
publication within, but it was 5 years, but yeah.
Still, that's awesome. And what a great problem to have, I think, right? That you have too much of a story for it to be constrained in a short story format. So you mentioned getting queried and going through. Can you talk a little bit about that process and also what made you decide to go that route rather than look at self-publishing, for example?
Sure. So I'll start with the second question. I really wanted to be traditionally published because I don't know anything about the publishing industry, and it is a whole career in itself. And I just thought, oh man, I don't want to have to learn how to like format a novel and like do the cover art and um, the marketing. And so I just thought if I could get this traditionally published, that would be ideal. I think it would kind of maybe reach a larger audience because I don't have a huge platform or a huge following. I think someone like Andy Weir with The Martian, who already had a really big following and then decided to self-publish, it makes a lot of sense. But for someone like me, it just didn't. Um, so my first novel, I queried and decided to shelve it after getting some feedback. I was like, okay, that's a good practice novel. Let me do it for real this time. And the second time around, I was much more methodical about it. I was went to a lot of like workshops where I worked the query, I worked the synopsis, and that helped a lot. And then I sent queries to my top tier agents in batches, and then mid tier, and then low tier in that order. So that when I got rejected from the top tier, I knew, okay, now it's time to go to the mid tier. And then after the lower tier, I decided to just go to these small indie publishers where they don't ask for an agent. They don't need an author who's already represented. And that ended up being a good fit for me. And looking back, I kind of should have known all along because that Melange and their young adult imprint is called Fire and Ice. Their imprint is a bit non-traditional in what they offer. They have like a pretty big LGBTQ selection in their Melange and their adult books. They also have like erotica. And so I think because my novel covers topics around sex and sexuality and things that are sometimes just like considered taboo, especially in young adult. That was what I was hearing back from agents that like the writing is good, but I don't think I could get this topic picked up. And so really kind of going to the a little bit of the counterculture, a little bit of the edges with this small indie press was ultimately where I found my home.
How did it change the way that you queried when you went from looking at trying to find representation to sort of going directly to the source yourself?
Um, so when I was querying agents, I would I kind of like stalked the agent. Like I looked at all of the books that they represented. I was on Query Tracker, so I was able to like I paid for the subscription. I was able to look at, you know, their history, what publishing companies they had been with, what kind of books they like to publish, who they represented, were they anything like me? Um, and then I would write a query letter that was just targeted for them specifically. So I would mention a recent novel that they, you know, represented. I'd talk about something I saw they tweeted. I don't know. Some of them probably were like, wow, this person has too much time on their hands. But you know, I think it paid off. I ended up getting six um partials or fulls. I think I got six partial requests and then two full requests. And ultimately, all of them passed. Again, many of them cited that reason of just the topic being a bit taboo. So yeah. So it was very personalized to a single person. When I sent it to my launch, I didn't really know who to identify. I didn't know, you know, I read the slush pile for the Harvard Review for about 3 years, and my name wasn't really available. So no one knew that I was the first person reading their work. And so I wasn't sure if I'm not targeting like a specific person, an agent, who am I writing it to? Um, so I kind of, yeah, just trying to, I remember, especially with Mélange, I think I panic ordered like two of their novels and like read them in like 3 days, like before I decided to submit to them, so that I could reference something of theirs and see like, oh yeah, like my novel is kind of like this, or covers this topic, and I see that you covered this topic here. And
I love that idea of panic ordering and reading to just, yeah. Um, so just shifting gears a little bit because I skipped ahead of the things that I was going to ask because you mentioned that. Can you tell us a little bit just about your writing routine when you were writing this book, and what are the things that got you to the point where you could complete it and have it ready to be submitted?
absolutely. I had a routine, and I was very lucky because I manage a hospitality business and it's part-time. So I was able to wake up in the mornings, not open my email, not touch my phone, and sit down and write. And I wrote until I got 2,000 words. That could be an hour, that could be 4 hours, that could be 6 hours, but that's what I did. And if the moment I opened my email, I was lost, right? But as long as I just went straight to my word processor, I would do it. And I did that Monday through Friday for years. Uh, and that was really my routine.
That's amazing. I yeah, I do not have the discipline to ignore my email and my social media and everything in the morning. So I usually don't get really in the groove until like 4 o'clock. So is that what you still do, or do you have has your writing practice, I guess, evolved over time?
It's swapped. I am working as a developer now. And so in the mornings I wake up and I program. Yeah. And I save my writing for evenings, weekends, when I can fit it in. It's no longer uh, the thing that I devote the majority of my time to. Yeah. The other thing that helped me for the whole time I was writing, and luckily I still have this support, is a writing group. And so through my classes, I had gotten together with a few other students, and I want to say we met maybe every other week for a few years, and we all of us had like a manuscript we were working on. And so it was getting their feedback. And then I would also take this novel and would go on to give it to future teachers, where it was a little more appropriate, like novel writing or young adult writing classes. I think Mary's class, I brought it for her, and she's brilliant and gave me a lot of really good feedback. Yeah.
That's Mary Sullivan Walsh for those who yeah aren't already in the program. Um, Actually, that's a really that reminds me. Are there any particular courses at the extension school, instructors courses that you would say somebody who's working on writing their novel should absolutely take?
Yes. Anything Elizabeth Sharp teaches. Yeah, all of that. Um, she changed the way I wrote, like I think I learned something from all of the courses, but in her course, I saw growth as a writer in myself and everyone around me. And the charisma and energy and joy she brings into the process is unlike anyone else.
That's amazing. And that's so good to hear. I'm doing her book year right now. My husband and I are both in it. And I'm just in awe of how much progress I've made even just in these few months. So yeah, that resonates for sure. Um, uh, so don't want to give too much away from the book in case people haven't had a chance to read it yet, or if they're watching this later. But can you talk just a little bit about how you developed the characters and what went into that and how they grew?
Oh, that's such a good question. it's so funny when I'm talking to my friends or family who aren't writers, they think the way a person writes a book is they sit down, they write chapter one, two, three, four, all the way to the end, and then boom, the book is done. And, and I was like, that is maybe for some people that's not been my experience. And it's the same for characters. They're not so Andrew Rue was partially formed. I had a pretty good idea of who he was, this sort of self-absorbed kid who was just trying to sort himself out and had a lot of feels. But I didn't, Kate was a mystery to him and to me, and she slowly revealed herself to me as this person with her own stuff going on, and why she had such a good front was of the pain that she was hiding and covering up in her family. Um, and I think I didn't know fully who she was until maybe 2 years into the writing process. And
Oh,
a lot of
wow.
that was, yeah, my fellow writers in my writing group going, why does he love her? Why? Who cares? And I'm like, well, why? Um, yeah, I guess that's true. Like, who cares? And then I realized why I cared about her, and why Rue cared about her. And that was, yeah, a pretty big moment. I would say some of the other characters, Shaz, the best friend, and then her partner, Jono, um, they were a bit flatter in the beginning, and then I made them more multidimensional. Like I originally Jono was just kind of like that shitty older brother-esque dude who would eat your food and like kick your backpack and like I don't know, like be jealous for no reason. And then it was really challenging for me and fun to try to go, how can I make Jono a whole person and not a caricature? And so that was a process, and I was really proud that I was able to see that character arc and see him become friends with Rue without ruining too much. But yeah.
That's really amazing because yeah, I think and I don't even think most people understand how difficult it is to write a character that is three-dimensional and that has, their own inner life and happenings. So that's really great to hear. Um, Sort of along those lines, was there a lot of research that you had to do for this book? And particularly, I'm always interested because you're writing from the perspective of a teenager, and not to call you out, but you obviously are not a teenager. So so I'm just always curious about the research process in general, but also in getting into that mindset and making sure that you're connecting, I guess, at that level, because I think you do just such a great job of that with the character.
Thanks for asking. I did quite a bit of research. In fact, at one point, I was like, if my laptop is taken, it's going to look really bad because all of my YouTube searches are like teenage theater experience or like upset teenager or like 15-year-old who was just recently done. It was like very awkward to explain my YouTube history. And then I don't have a TikTok account, but I actually got on TikTok just to like watch the theater kids talk about their experiences and blocking and the drama. I had always been a little jealous of theater kids, and this let me experience it in a distant way, but still a really fun way. Reddit was my friend. I was all over like the theater, the Shakespeare, and of course, AVEN, the Asexuality Visibility Network, and then just different LGBTQ resources. I have a few friends who identify as asexual, and they were wonderful, and they also are writers. And when I mentioned the topic of my writing, they were like, "Oh my God, let me talk to you." And there was bonding and fun. And I think, yeah, I did a decent amount of research.
Awesome. You mentioned you had friends who identified as ace who provided feedback. Did you have specifically a sensitivity reader?
Yes. So I had a sensitivity reader from Avon and they were so generous. Like I reached out to them, this nobody, like, hey, I'm writing a novel. Can you explain? Um, and they were wonderful. They said, sure, send it our way. And they responded. They gave me good feedback. I implemented that feedback. And I think it's so important to have sensitivity readers. I also had, struggled a bit writing a cis dude, right? Like, I'm not that either. And had my spouse and a few other people read it and, does this feel authentic to you, to your experience? And in a way, Rue is very much his own person and that's part of his identity is he doesn't super fit in anywhere. So that was okay that not everyone was like, yeah, I could see myself in him. But I didn't want to write anything that was like offensive or cringy or so far off the mark that it wouldn't make sense or wouldn't resonate with the community.
That's very cool. Yeah, I have seen a lot of different conversations around sensitivity readers, but I think, and your experience seems to hold that it's almost silly not to when you can get such good feedback. Um, so we did talk a little bit about your path to getting this above all published, but can you tell me, I guess, was there anything really surprising about the publishing process that you would not have expected and that you learned and can share your wisdom with those of us who haven't been through it yet?
Hmm. So much of it was new for me. Um, One of the things that helped me the most, that was quite surprising, was reading short humor pieces. So, gosh, why am I blank? Reductress, if you know
Oh,
that
I
one.
do. My
Yeah,
favorite.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So good. I think there's Belladonna. I think that's the other another one. So these are just like humor uh lit journals or magazines, and I would just spend some time reading those, and it made my dialogue like uh, funnier and quicker and more witty. And it made me laugh, and it helped teach me how to like translate that humor onto the page for my characters.
Very cool. Um, uh, you mentioned a little bit about obviously you were new to the process and that's part of why you went the traditional route, but um I guess how involved were you in things like making decisions about the cover art? We talked about that for 2 seconds before everybody joined. But like the person on the cover and the marketing of it and how it was sort of presented to the world. I guess how much input did you have and are you happy with how it all shook out?
I'm really, really happy with how it shook out and the process. I've heard from other friends who are traditionally published and their pieces or their work, the cover art, they had like no say. And my cover artist was so patient with me. um, she like sent me this email and she was like, tell me, like, look at these palettes of color and like tell me what colors resonate with you. And then she was like, send me images of the covers of novels that you like. And so she took so much of what I liked into it. And then she sent me a proof, and I looked at it and I was like, I'm so sorry to be that person, but there are like 8 things that I want changed. And she was like, we can do it. Let's do it. Let's change it. And one thing she was like, I don't know how to change that, but I reached out to my mentor and she helped me. And then I was able to fix that. At one point, they had my name on his t-shirt. And I was like,
Oh, okay.
it almost feels like a brand or something. I was like, I just don't know. That just doesn't make sense to me. Um, And he really turned out the way he looked in my head, which I think I'm so lucky that I'd had
That's
to do
amazing.
zero of the design work, and yet he looks like Rue to me. Yeah.
And just for anybody who doesn't have a hard copy, it is so gorgeous. Yeah, it is beautiful. So I'm glad that that's what he looked like for you. So that worked. Um, and so that's sort of the cover design. What about marketing and how it was positioned, I guess, in the market?
Yeah. One more thing about the cover design. I wanted it to be fun to look at from like a younger demographic. And so it almost looks a little cartoony or a little less realistic in that way. And that was like an intentional thing too. Marketing, I joined a community of other authors that had been published through Melange and connected with a few of them, connected with them on Goodreads. It was fun. Like a few of them bought my novel. I bought a few of their novels. Um, but Melange is a small indie publisher. I think if my goal were to make this my career, uh, it probably wouldn't have been the right choice for me. But my goal really was to be traditionally published, to find a patron who loved my art, who loved my writing. And I found that with them. They truly like my voice and my content, which is unusual. So I think that was my goal more so than marketing. Um, yeah, they're probably like the top five, like Simon and Schuster, Penguin Random, etc., who would do like a much better job of getting the word out there. And I did some research on that of like, oh, what's the best way to like get my book out there? Is it like blog posts? Is it going on podcasts? Is it, those and pretty much none of those turns out like does a whole lot. I think the thing to do is to like, can you get your book to a TikTok influencer? Like that's like, can you do that? So I hired a micro intern, which is a really cool concept, highly recommend. They just do a small project for you. And this guy was so cool. And he reached out to a bunch of TikTok influencers, and he did get one of them who was interested and read the novel and did a little shout out on their page. And not for money. That was the thing. I said, I don't want to spend money on marketing on this. And so the cool thing was because the TikTok guy was a part of the LGBTQ community and cared about uh, getting out information about novels with representation, he did it for free. And so I felt a lot of support within the LGBT community more specifically. So I think this is like a niche market with like maybe a little cult following more so than a big box hit.
That's so amazing, though. I love that. And so you said a micro intern. So is it like how does that work? Is it somebody who's experienced specifically in doing this type of work, or it's just a, I guess, extra set of hands?
Yeah, in this case, there's a site, and I am blanking on the name of it now, but it's a bunch of university students from all over the US. And I think they do it through their university. There's like affiliate connection there. And you just kind of scan through like what their different aptitudes are, like what they're offering. And there's so many out there who are like, I am a marketer, like I can do like TikTok marketing, and just reached out to one, and they're micro because they are project based. So you pay them just for like the work they do for that little project.
That's very cool. I hadn't heard of that, but it reminds me sort of the virtual PA that they had
Mm.
at I guess the beginning of the internet sort of uh words. You know what I mean? Yeah. Um, so I think you touched on this a little bit already, but just what are, I guess, the most rewarding things about having this book that you wrote out in the world?
I was really quiet about this. I didn't do a book launch. didn't encourage people that I knew to like purchase it and read it. I don't know why I felt kind of shy about it, uh, but it felt like a very kind of personal journey to me. And what was really surprising was how many friends found out about it anyway, and how many people supported me. I got a ton of photos of my friends. Like it would be my friend just like holding up the book or like just like reading it. I had one which was adorable and he had it like uh he was reading it to like his infant daughter who was like
Aw.
curled up on his lap. And almost with no provocation or no sort of qualifying text around the photo, just the photos. And I would be like, okay, thank you. And that was really, really neat just to see how many people were invested in me and invested in my progress and were showing up for me in a cool way. I didn't expect that. So.
That's so cool. I love that so much. And I want to see those pictures at some point. That sounds adorable. You said you felt shy about it. So can you, I guess, share, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit more, I guess, eh, about that feeling and particularly, I think, as you're going to try and get something published and put it out in the world, I think that that's a very interesting an interesting state of mind to, and I can very much relate and understand it. So that's, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think part of it just has to do with kind of what's going on in the world right now, culturally. Um, mm, not, I haven't always been able to be open about my identity. Um, and I have experienced on occasion hate around that. And this was such this was my little baby that I was putting into the world, and I didn't want it to be touched by that. And unfortunately, I have gotten some of that on different platforms. Not a whole lot. I'm still fine, and I think if I'm putting stuff out that no one disagrees with, then like, what am I doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I think it's important to put something out there that makes people think, that make people have an emotional reaction, have a response. And some of them are going to have a negative response. And that's where the shyness, I think, came from. Yeah.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. Absolutely respect that. Uh, I am glad though to hear that you had such support from the people around you and that it has been, yeah, I'm very, that makes my heart happy. Um, uh, so since this book came out, can you tell us a little bit, what are you working on now? What sorts of projects? What are your, I guess, your goals as far as writing goes, for going forward?
So I've taken writing in a few different directions. One direction is when I build apps for clients, I can also do their web copy, which they love because then they don't have to write it. And that's a really neat way to use my degree, use my education, because every single entrepreneur I speak to and nonprofit executive director has a story to tell. And knowing how to tell a story is a skill, and not everyone has that. And so that's what I can bring to them and offer them. Um, and so I think, like, yeah, every software developer should get a degree in creative writing and
I
learn how
bet
to
that'll
tell a
be really
story.
popular. You should definitely, yeah. That's so true though. It is a skill to be able to take an idea and turn it into something that people can digest and understand and relate to. And it's a skill that not a lot of people have. And not to stereotype, but particularly in my experience, software developers are not always, yeah, the biggest on storytelling. So I can definitely see how that would add a lot of value for a project like that.
I really think so because every app has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every app is sort of like walking the user through a journey, right? Like the user's journey. Um, so the other way that I'm continuing writing is I am currently editing another manuscript, and I'm looking forward to hopefully Melange will also be interested in publishing that. They've expressed some interest, but of course they can't offer a guarantee until they've read it. Yeah.
Is it, would you mind telling us anything about it? Is it in the same universe or?
So this one I've like called it Snowbee, and it's about a kid, and I think we're leaning toward middle grade for it. I think that's where it is, but it's hard to say until it's fully out there. And it's contemporary and not romantic. Yeah, it's more of a an adventure mystery. Yeah.
Very cool. Did you intend to write this above all as that young adult level? Was that the plan from the beginning, or did it sort of evolve into that, I guess, tier of adultness?
I get it. Yeah. I hate to admit this, but I adored Simon versus the Homo sapien agenda. And once I heard his voice, and I'm blanking on the name, I think that's Becky. Gosh, why am I blanking on the author's name? But I just thought I need I need that voice in my life, and I understand that. And so, in the same way that if you it's a weird analogy, but if you like put your lunch in the fridge and then take it out, your lunch is going to taste like whatever it was sitting next to in the fridge, right? And so I was writing this novel and reading Simon versus the Homo sapien agenda, which I think became a movie called Love, Simon. And that was young adult. And so I was just very determined that this would be young adult and like that. Simon was like his, in that same school system is kind of where I was thinking. Yeah.
Very cool. I haven't heard of Simon versus the Homo sapien agenda, but just from the title, it sounds amazing. So I'm gonna have to check it out. Last question before I open it up to the audience. What are you reading lately? Like, what is inspiring you? What have you read that's given you that same sort of I want to put my lunch in the fridge next to this food feeling?
Um, so I try not to read anything in the same genre as what I'm writing now because I'm a leaky cauldron and like what I'm reading, like that voice will start to get onto the page. So what I'm loving, of course, like Murderbot series, amazing. Um, An Elderly Lady is Up to No Good, hilarious. That's a series as well. In terms of more sciencey, I would say Orbital blew my mind recently.
That won the Booker Prize, right?
Did it? Probably, I think it won a prize. Yeah.
I think so. What about it? I'm curious because I haven't read it yet, but you're like the fifth person that has said it's so good. So
I am a little uh science fic obsessed. And so I've always been interested in what it's like in the International Space Station and like what it's like to be an astronaut. And I subscribe to like astronaut podcasts and like watch all the movies and read their autobiographies and things. And so Orbital, I think it's one day in the life of I think it's five or six astronauts in the ISS and just like their experiences in that day. And it starts like from beginning to end. And I appreciate that it's, I don't just get the American, I get the Japanese person, I get the Russian person, like all of the different viewpoints. And then it goes into speaking of Mary Sullivan Walsh, it's a poetic prose. It's lyrical.
oh, nice. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Um, Very cool. All right. So we do have some questions in the chat already. And if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, I will read the ones from the chat first. So the first one is, how did you come up with the ending? Was it hard having so many subplots, making sure they all tied up in the end? If it's possible to explain this without spoilers.
I will say that's another thing that changed. Because originally I don't know how much to give away here, but I had basically Rue get to the place where he wanted to be. Um, and then one of my feedback from my beta readers, from an early reader, was that's too predictable, that's too saccharine, and like that's also not really Rue. And I thought about it because I was like, what? This is the whole point is this, like, what do you mean this isn't Rue? And I was like, oh my God, you're right, because I gave Rue a little bit of the heroine's journey. If you've heard of the hero's journey, the heroine's journey is usually a journey of disillusionment. And I intentionally gave that to Rue so that he would go through a process of naivety to disillusionment. And that changed his mind at the end. And so I had to change how it ended. I had to make him once again choose his own path once he realized how things were really working.
The next question is, will there be a sequel?
For some reason, I can't write series. I get like a new idea, and then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make a book out of that and run with it. So I don't think so, but it would be neat. I'd like to see where they go and what they do and how that works. Maybe.
I for sure would not mind spending more time in the world. I was amazed at just how easy it was to get into reading it. Not to like totally digress, but it's just so relatable, even though I relate not at all to anything to do with the character, but I did. And I really appreciated that. So I can see why someone would ask that, because yeah, spending more time in the world would be cool. So I think you've answered this already, but there is a question if you're working on anything currently. I guess
Definitely, yeah. And I'm still having some short stories and some very confessional essays are out there circulating. I had a short story published by um, Brattle. Oh gosh, Brattle. What's the Harvard
Brattle Street Review.
Yes, by Brattle Street Review a few months ago, which was amazing.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. So I've learned that the very short stories, like under 1,000 words, are really fun for me to write. And then I'll like write it, like edit it a few times, and then just like get it out there. So yeah, I think that's probably the other thing I'm working on a little bit.
Nice. Another question, do you plan on getting an agent now?
Ooh, that's a good question. I wouldn't say no, but but I like my publishing company. They've treated me so well. They're very patient. They're very responsive. I can tell they care about me. So it'd have to be someone I really get along with.
Would you then any future projects, do you think you would try and stay with the same publisher?
I'd like to, yeah, and it sounds like they'd like to stay with me. So yeah, hopefully.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. Did we have any other questions? Nat, you've been manning the chat if you have anything else to copy paste in.
Not necessarily questions. Those were the most that I had. I do have a personal comment. I really enjoyed the fast-paced plot. It made it like very easy to read, page turner, and I'm one of those people that like pays attention to what are they called in movies where it's like the hat is placed in a certain spot and then they change the scene and then it's somewhere else. I'm like, oh, there's a word for that. You know what I'm talking about?
Continuity?
Continuity.
Yes, continuity. So like I'm like looking for those in books, and I was like really impressed with how you made everything tie in at the end, which is I personally really struggle with that because I forget what I write, I have to reread what I write. Like, how do you keep track of those Easter eggs that you put in to make sure that you don't like forget about them? Was that mostly like your sensitive readers or your, beta readers? Or is there a way that you track that when you type?
So I have, that's a great question. And continuity errors were probably the thing that I found the most often in this and probably all of my writing. It's so tricky to like build this world and then go, wait, was he wearing a blue cap with white stripes or a white cap with blue stripes? I can't remember. Especially with Shaz's like barrettes, I was like, okay, what is she feeling today? Her barrette has to represent that. And like, wait, is she still feeling that? What is she feeling now? And I have each character gets their own like document on my Google Drive, and I just go over all of their likes, all of their dislikes, what their styles are, what their preferences are, what they would say, how they would respond in like certain situations, and I interview them. And then because of that, I kind of know what they're going to be wearing, what they're going to be doing. And so that helps me keep a like a continuous uh, narrative that's internally consistent with each character. Is I try to get to know them.
And that's, you touched on that just a little bit earlier, but do you write in chronological order, or do you just kind of write whatever scene feels good at the time? Because that is amazing that you can keep track of all of those if that's the case.
I'm a plantser. So I plot and then I pants. Like I think I'm writing linearly, but I find out that I'm not. And I find out that, hey, I need a scene in between chapter 2 and 3. I need this character to have this experience for this to make sense. Or like I need to go back and like darken this character. I need to go back and like lighten this character in terms of like making them mean or scary or like bright and cheery and happy. And so I would say the narrative is more of like a layered cake. I kind of go back and like put another layer on and another layer on.
Cool. You mentioned adding, but Erin asked, did you end up deleting any entire chapters or doing any major rewrites?
I have enough deleted from this novel to be another novel. Like it's disgusting. Like,
do you have it saved somewhere? Because there's our sequel, right? You just
yeah, Elizabeth Sharp is all about that. She's like, compost your old writing, make it new writing. And like I had the idea of like, ooh, I could just like switch some names and like, no, I can't do it. But yeah, I probably have like another like 40K of words from this novel that never made it into the novel itself. And I'm hoping that now that I'm, revisiting my fifth novel and editing that the process will go a little faster. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So I guess everyone has their own artistic process.
That's incredible. Yeah, Nat added in the chat that my scrap stock is getting longer than my actual manuscript, which I feel that as well. I realized the other day how many words I have and how many words I'm going to have at the end, and I'm like, that's another book. I'm gonna have to cut an entire book out. So, so it's very comforting to hear that is a shared experience. So, is there anything that you took out that you regret now that you wish you would have left in?
Really, I made Roo, he has so much interiority. He does so much navel gazing. And I wrote a lot of that and took it out. And I realized later that was my process of getting to know him, was writing him, what is he thinking? What is he feeling in this moment? And I was like, the readers don't need to read that. I don't need to tell them that. I can just show them that, and I can show them that in a few short, scenes. They don't need pages and pages of woe is me, like my life, right? And so it was helpful for me, but again, like not necessary for the reader.
That's interesting. It sounds similar to what we talked to Bethany Jacobs about, who writes science fiction. And she said, in terms of world building, there's a lot that gets written for her to understand the world and sort of exist within it. So that's really interesting that it's happening sort of with that, like you said, navel gazing of the character to get to know him better. Um, uh, Yeah, Nat said that's my way of getting known my characters too, but then my writing group suffers sitting through it. So we're running low on time, but one last question before we go is, you mentioned the power of writing groups, and that's something that, having joined the book year with Elizabeth Sharp McKenna, I'm feeling so strongly. What do you think is the sweet spot? Like, how frequently having people read the entire piece, and what kinds of feedback do you want to hear from people when they are reading your piece?
I love any and all feedback. I I think it's all very valid and helpful. What I'm careful about is not going back and editing. Once I get that feedback, I'll sit on it. Maybe I'll sit on it until the entire novel is finished. Maybe it will help me remove my the words I depend on a little too much, right? And I'll go, oh gosh, I didn't realize that I said that so many times, or one of my characters has a catchphrase every third paragraph or something. So I think smaller things, little catches are really, really helpful. I think in terms of plot, I have to be really careful because my writing colleagues are brilliant, but they all also have their stories to tell. And their plot they're just maybe not where I want to take my characters. So I take it and I think about it, and then if it's helpful, then I'll implement it.
That's such a great great piece of advice. I think Nat put in the chat, marinating in it. And yeah, I think that's brilliant. I am the type of person who will always go immediately and change everything that I've written based on, and then I'll get contradictory feedback and I'll be like, oh shit, now I got to change it all back. So yeah, that is really very good advice. So thank you for that. Before we wrap up, any closing thoughts, anything else you'd like to add or share before we say goodbye?
I just want to thank everyone so much for coming out and supporting me and being a part of this. And I absolutely could not have written this without all of you in my life. And if you write, keep writing. And if you don't write, start writing. And I would love to read whatever you are working on as well.
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate you taking this time and sharing your insights. And I know that it's so helpful for me to hear from somebody who's gone through this process. So thank you, really, sincerely. And yeah, with that, I'm going to stop recording.